And I've always been very confused by that question. I'm like, well, it's an outlet. Like everybody knows how to use an outlet. But because they weren't looking at it like an outlet, they were looking at it like an EV charger. This looked like something completely foreign and different to them. And one of the best pieces of advice that I ever got about AI was like treat it like a coworker, not like a tool. And it'll
Mhm.
actually work a lot better. And that has absolutely been the truth. It's the perception where people think they know what they need, and then they see something that is completely the opposite of what they were thinking. And then there's like a disconnect within their brain because the perception doesn't match the reality.
So, Joseph, thank you for taking the time to join this podcast. Appreciate your time. And looking forward to having this conversation. I know Pando Electric does a lot of EV charging, and we'll get more into that. Before we get into EV charging, what was the original inspiration for starting this EV charging venture, if you will, and where do you see this going? And what's your vision on this?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So the reason this got started was because our CEO, Aaron Lee, was working at a EV company, Neo, and was doing a lot of research into, what would be the ideal charging solution for most EV drivers. And as he started to look into the market, he found that, in all honesty, the most universal charger is actually an outlet in your home. And that was where most people were doing their charging, whether it was from a NEMA 1450 outlet, like a level 2 outlet, or even a level 1 outlet. It was always coming down to outlets. Then he went and looked at sort of the rest of the charging spectrum, so outside of the home, and he saw how like it's just different and it wasn't working. And so that's where sort of the ideation came from. And then he kind of narrowed it down and narrowed the focus down to just multifamily housing, which seems to have sort of the most odd mix of this is someone's home, but we're going to put in these like big expensive charging stations. So the property owner is going to be on the hook for, this really expensive appliance. And then, the EV drivers are going to use it, but then things break and mishap and you have to then fix this expensive thing. And so it creates this snowball effect where then the property owner, the one who paid for the whole thing, is less and less likely to want to fix it or even add more because it becomes like a never-ending headache for them. And so he came up with the Pando Smart Outlet. It's a NEMA 1450 connected outlet. It's got a lot of built-in connectivity. It does all the metering. It has a built-in revenue grade meter. It has built-in adaptive load management. You can daisy chain them together. And by doing all of that, he drove down the cost of ownership for the property owner to like the pretty much the bare bones, right? Like most of our installs are about $1,500 to $2,000 per unit, which in general is like significantly less expensive. And then on top of that, there's no maintenance, there's no ongoing maintenance, which makes it an ideal situation for the property owner because not only are they providing a necessary and needed amenity, but it's also not a headache anymore. They don't have to constantly be fixing this thing. And so the way that we see this going into the future is that I do believe that at least most apartments and multifamily housing are going to just turn to socket-based charging simply because that's exactly the same thing that, single family homeowners did for the exact same reasons. They didn't want to put in this expensive device into their home that does have
Mhm.
breakage issues and then constantly have to be fighting with this thing when they're just like, I have an outlet. I'm just going to plug in my mobile adapter that came with the car and I'll just use that until it doesn't work anymore. And lo and behold, that just keeps working. So that's what they keep using.
Obviously, the vision is to put them more and more accessible, right? In more and more homes. So your vision in 10, 5, 10 years, you're basically looking at mass usage of this for all electric vehicles.
Yeah, basically, like, and then it's a weird balance because, like, in a single family home, the EV owner has total say of what's going to happen in their house, right?
Hmm.
Whereas in a multifamily space, you don't. Even if it's in a condo where you own your own condo, you don't necessarily have the ability to just snap your fingers and say, "I'm installing X," right? It's a
Hmm.
shared space. You need to talk to the HOA board. There's a whole thing.
Hmm.
So really, what we're looking at is you have to kind of balance out the needs of the community
Hmm.
and the needs of the individual and kind of work out something that works for both. And that's where I think the sockets really do come into play and make it a situation where everybody's winning. And that's why
Hmm.
we're seeing such rapid growth.
Yeah, I'm curious, Joseph, what makes the Pando electric chargers more unique in the marketplace? Why aren't your competitors doing what you're doing? Seems like the right way to go ahead. Why are they still building expensive Tesla chargers? What's the rationale here?
I don't. I can't answer why they're doing it. I come from other EV charging companies that have done this. So I was an original hire at EverCharge. We did it. I think it just you get locked into a mindset of this is how I think a thing should look.
Hmm.
And then from that point on, you just stop considering, the other aspects. One of the things that has come from the traditional system is load balancing, right? Where you're able to actually, load balance across all these chargers because you can basically oscillate the level of charge across the vehicles. It
Hmm.
turns out that actually that's not the most efficient way to do it by dropping it down lower and lower and lower. It's actually a little
Hmm.
bit more efficient to give one full power, wait until it's at an optimal charge level, like 80, 90%, and then rotate through each one. It's actually much faster
Hmm.
to charge vehicles that way, weirdly enough.
Hmm.
But I think in general, it just comes down to the fact that this is what they thought people wanted, and they thought that this is what an EV charger looks like and has to look like. And
Hmm.
because of that, it didn't change. And so it did take somebody who just was thinking more like, how do I make this simple? And that's where, the idea really came from. Like simplicity is often something that doesn't find its way into sort of the technology space until way later, until someone
Right.
sees, okay, this is over bloated. There's too much stuff here. Let's just strip it down to the base level of what people actually need. And that's what Pando did.
That's very interesting. So you're obviously listening to your customer, which is important here, right? Especially multifamily and condos, people who live in shared facilities. That's the point here, right? They don't have
Yeah.
their own single family home with their own little 240 volt circuit. They basically are sharing community wise, which is what most cities are. I mean, if you think about the maximum concentration of vehicles, this is a very important solution. Um, from a customer experience standpoint, you obviously have to engage with the customer differently. Just curious about how you use data and maybe AI to smooth this customer experience process. I'm sure you guys do stuff that makes your life easier. So I'm just curious to hear about that.
Yeah, I think a lot of what we do is communication to our customer
Hmm.
because you said, we had to listen to our customers. The thing is that the customers actually don't know what they want. Because
Hmm.
they've heard they're the same in the same kind of trap where they've heard that this is the thing they need, this traditional charging system that's probably a little expensive, and so they're like, that's where they start planning towards. And so what we need to do, the first thing that we need to do is really educate the market, and bring
Hmm.
them more fundamental understanding of what they actually need and what they could get away with, right? You could put in a bunch of very expensive, charge point chargers into a building and it'll work, right? It's not like it doesn't. It's just more expensive and there's more maintenance. But if you can offer somebody an alternative solution where it's like, hey, you don't actually need to be paying all this money.
Hmm.
That's where we've seen a significant shift. Like using AI for me, like I'm a marketer, I'm in the corporate strategy space, so it's a lot of like helping me condense ideas down, like really big ideas to something that's very simple and straightforward to communicate to people. I always, when I get involved with an AI company, I'm like, I need this to help me turn one person into 100, right? Like, because
Hmm.
we're a startup, I can't hire a person for every single seat that I need. And AI has also really aided in the development of our company, by being able to place a virtual person into a seat that I can, hey, can you make this, a little bit, read a little bit nicer? Can you make a social media post that, can have a little bit more chance of hitting virality? Right? Those types of
Hmm.
things where I would normally have to hire like a junior employee, I can just hand off to the AI. I think a lot of people are worried about that because now, like, how do we get the junior employees scaled up? But I
Hmm.
think that more actually isn't my concern because I do have a lot of junior employees and all they've done is elevate their level up above the
Hmm.
AI now. And so they're more, more like a mid-level employee when they come through the door
Hmm.
rather than a junior. So I think it's just going to take a little bit of time and a shift. But I'm not super worried about like the education curve anymore. I think it's more just learning to use this new system. And one of the best pieces of advice that I ever got about AI was like treat it like a coworker, not like a tool. And it'll
Hmm.
actually work a lot better. And that has absolutely been the truth.
Right. It's a little, yeah. It's interesting you would say coworker and tool. That's an interesting way of looking at it because it is not it's a little bit more than a tool, but it's not as much as a human. So it's
Yeah.
like, so a coworker is just fine, I guess, somebody who cares only to a degree, right? So it's interesting. Yeah. Any so obviously charging is not an error, it's not an error-free process. There could be
Mhm.
issues with charging. And I know personally that, sometimes the charger doesn't charge and you just put it in and you're like, hey, what's going on? Um, how do you guys collect data operationally at the point of charging? Like if you because you once you've sold the product, once it's installed, it's running, and then you have a problem, how do you manage that deployment?
Yeah, so each one of our chargers isn't a single charger. I actually start like every presentation I give, I show this picture of this forest. Shows the Pando aspen, which we're named
Mhm.
after.
Mm,
But the Pando aspen, it'll look like a giant forest full of, thousands of trees. And the reality is it's actually a single living organism. It's just one
mm,
tree.
mhm,
And that's the way our system is designed as well. Like you can come onto a site and see hundreds of charging stations, but it's actually one charger in the
mm,
way that we've set it up. So it shares a brain. So it basically
mhm.
understands like this person is charging over here, this spot is free, this person's going to end charging at this time so that person can charge. And so this is all happening kind of in the background. And so it's doing all these little calculations, understanding when someone's going to come in, when someone's going to go out. It'll flag any potential faults. There's a ton of sensors inside of it, inside of each one of the chargers, and it'll say like, hey, there's a potential overheating issue or there's a potential overarching issue that you might need to look at. We're going to shut this down until somebody comes out on site to actually look at it. Thankfully, none of those issues have actually happened, but it's all there. It's all built into the system.
Okay. Yeah, because that's an important thing for scaling, right? I like the way you're talking about Pando Aspen. I did not know about that, and I'm going to look it up. It sounds really
Yeah.
cool. It's the idea that you would have a single brain across all charging stations makes sense, which means that you're sharing the same reference and you're sharing the same intelligence, which helps you not get siloed. And, big companies wish they had that, but that's really cool.
Well, also it
Yeah.
helps, just to add one little bit there, it also
Hmm.
helps with like the future iterations of the company, the future iterations of our grid, right?
Yeah.
Like because it shares a single mind, it can be expanded upon with more stuff.
Mm,
So it can, monitor and manage building energy, it can monitor and manage batteries and solar and all sorts of, appliances across the building because it's all essentially the
hmm
same. It's all just the power of that building and where it needs to move it to. And so
hmm
as we expand and grow, that's kind of where we're heading into is like a far more efficient energy system, not only locally within each building, but also like more broadly across like the entire grid.
Hey, it looks like you guys thought it through, and I'm excited to see where you guys go with this. I'm sure you have issues though, right? If you just had to look at the multifamily space or, a condo space, what are the biggest barriers you guys have seen in deploying your technology? Just talk to me about, different
Yeah.
types.
Technologically, we haven't had any issue, right? I think our system's actually designed to go into buildings that are brand new and they can plan all this out way ahead of time, and buildings that are super old and have basically no power, right? It's pretty flexible in moving around in the building. Our issue is the thing that I brought up before, which is perception, right?
Mm,
We have a perceived notion of what a charger looks like in our head. And if it doesn't look like that gas station or kind of like that gas station that we're familiarized with, it becomes some kind of a problem. And I'll give a really good
mm,
example. Like we have been asked many, many times in our, like in our presentations when we go and meet with a potential customer, like, will EV drivers know that they can use this? And I've always been very confused by that question. I'm like, well, it's an outlet. Like everybody knows how to use an outlet. But because they weren't looking at it like an outlet, they were looking at it like an EV charger. This looked like something completely foreign and different to them. And so their brain wasn't making the connection to, yeah, of course, they'll know how to use this. It's just an outlet. Everybody knows how to use an outlet. The reality is that they were right. Like there are customers who look at that and they say, well, what am I supposed to do with this? And it's one of those things where
mm,
it just takes a little bit of, if you just reframing what they think in their mind of what it should be, then all of a sudden it's like it opened up the world of possibilities to them. We actually have a slide in
mm.
our deck of just like, yes, CV drivers know how to use this because if you have just a regular old outlet in your garage setting, they'll walk up and they'll start plugging and charging into it because they know I can get energy from that outlet and probably also that it's going to be free. So I'll
Yeah.
get free energy for a while until the building makes a shift and a change. But that's kind of like where we've seen the biggest pain point is just dealing with the preconceived notion that this doesn't look like what I thought it should look like. And
Mhm.
because of that, I'm nervous about getting involved with it.
That's interesting. The perception thing is harder to erase. So moving into cities and public areas outside multifamily, the perception issue would probably be even more pronounced, I would imagine, because now it's just out there, right? People are like, I don't know about this. So how do you tackle that? I mean,
I don't think we'll ever move into the public space.
okay,
I mean, we might, but I don't see the future of Pando Electric as being a charging company. There
okay,
is a reason we're called Pando Electric and not Pando Charging,
okay.
because there's a lot bigger goals within the company internally to kind of expand. Like I was saying, if we're going to expand more into like the energy space. EV
Mm-hmm,
chargers are just sort of the entry level point in which we're coming in. A lot of that is going to be more dictated by, how ready the market is for more change and more disruption into, a space that does need disruption. Like I live here in California, our energy rates are kind of skyrocketing right now. A lot of that is down to the fact that electric vehicles and renewable energies have kind of exploded here. And it's not a bad thing. It's actually just a growing pain, really,
mm-hmm,
because what's going to happen is now we're starting to see the duck curves slowly disappear, and what we're going to
mm-hmm,
be able to do is then use all of these mobile battery packs that are vehicles more efficiently to balance out the grid. Like just
mm-hmm,
like we did a calculation today, right now in Los Angeles, there's enough energy driving around on the roads in electric vehicle battery packs that equates roughly to a nuclear power plant.
oh
And
wow.
so there's a ton of energy there that's probably not going to get used today that you
Mm-hmm,
could use to balance out the grid. You could use, I can absorb more energy when hey, solar's running now. I'll plug in, I'll get some extra energy and it'll be cheaper. Or, the wind is blowing, they don't have enough capacity to store it anymore. Well, let's dump it into these EVs. So
mm-hmm.
start to see EVs as an extension of the grid, as just simple mobile battery pack. Then you start to see like all the possibilities that exist therein.
Right. So that explains why you guys have designed a centralized intelligent system because now yeah, you can pretty much use it to power homes, work between the grid and the car, carry the energy where you want. It's actually mobile energy, right? Now it's at this point. Yeah,
Now you're
that's
getting
yeah.
it.
That really is interesting. Yeah, that's a really good vision, I think, because that makes it more efficient because energy will go where you need it as opposed to just being there, not being used, unused, and wasted. So that's from a regulatory standpoint, as my last question, I just want to get a sense of where you guys are at with this. Um, are you finding challenges in that area,
Oh
or are you
yeah.
guys, yeah.
Oh yeah. Again, it always goes back to that perception thing. Even the policymakers have a perception of what it needs to look like and what it needs to be. And so they've baked in a lot of these rules that apply to traditional systems that don't apply to us. A great example is a lot of like incentive programs throughout the country require a J1772 connector type on the end
Hmm.
of the charger. We don't have
Wow.
a J1772 because it's a plug, right? Someone
Hmm.
comes up to it and plugs into it, but it doesn't mean that it's bad or they can't use it. And it's actually a little bit more flexible in that the J1772 works with all vehicles except Tesla, more or
Hmm.
less. They're adopting the Tesla standard, but that's still coming. So it works with every vehicle except Tesla. So if you require the J1772, the Tesla owners need to buy an adapter. And if you required the Tesla connector, you'd have to get an adapter for the J1772. So, but with ours, they can take the charger that came with the car, the mobile cord, and plug in because it's a NEMA standard. Every
Hmm.
single mobile charger in the United States is able to plug into the NEMA standard. So it'll always be usable. And
Hmm.
then the other end is irrelevant to us. And it took a lot of work to get people to just understand that simple fact because
Wow.
we've had multiple meetings with multiple, government entities, utility providers who are offering incentives who are just like completely confused by this outlet because they're like, we don't understand how this works. And it sounds silly because you're like, well, it's just an outlet. Like, I don't understand how you don't understand. But again, it just goes back to like, it's the perception where people think they know what they need, and then they see something that is completely the opposite of what they were thinking. And then there's like a disconnect within their brain because the perception doesn't match the reality. And
Mm-hmm.
you just need to make sure you connect the two for them. And then we have seen here in the Bay Area, all of the incentive programs now include outlets. And now it's
Mm-hmm.
slowly starting to spread. It's going up into Sacramento. We're starting to see it slowly trickle down into Southern California. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
just taking a little bit of time for people to recognize, like, yeah, why are we, like boxing out the outlet? We should allow for them because it also helps those incentive programs spend their money far more efficiently. Whereas
Right.
we're installing an outlet for, $1,500 to $2,000, our competitors are $4,000 to $6,000. Like we're a
Right.
third cost, straight out of the gate. So it makes more sense to funnel the money to the socket-based chargers in certain situations, of course, but especially for multifamily housing, because we can do more with the money than traditional systems can. So it's just getting people to understand that, and it just is taking a little time, but we are starting to see that general shift. Like we just won a $5.4 million grant from the CEC, the California Energy Commission. They are well aware that it's a socket-based solution. And even in that grant, there's still some consternation about it, but they're willing to give it a try. And I think
Mm-hmm.
they'll rapidly understand how much better our solution is, because the way we won was we promised 1,600 chargers with that money, whereas I think most of other people in the bids were at most four or 500 chargers. So like
Okay.
the scale we're able to do is like way higher as well.
Very interesting. This was great, Joseph. Thanks for your time, and I've learned a lot more, at least after this discussion, and I'm going to look up some of these terms, starting with the Pando Aspen, but I'm also going to look at the different chargers.
Absolutely, absolutely.